decide, okay, finally, and sometimes he had to wait 6-7 weeks to get the money he needed. And he was the king, by the way, so he wasn't a dictator king. He had to go ask, and they say, okay, we'll give you. He shows it is for the common good what he wants to do. It's for the good of everybody, for their own good too, and then they give him the money. But sometimes they were reluctant and they were slow, and all this was as you might expect. You know? So that's if you read in Philip II, that was his problem. But he was a monarch, but he didn't have absolute authority over everything. You know, the respect that people have rights based on customs and their rights. So this is there was something else I was going to mention, but I forgot there now. Anyway, so capitalism also is not a good Christian system. So it's not intrinsically evil, but in capitalism, money dictates. That's what it means. Capital is the money, and it creates class warfare. Class warfare, different. You have distinctions of classes. You have the labor class, and you have the capitalist class. The capitalist class, and then this comes up after factories and all this, and the capitalist class is there trying to make as much profit and squeeze as much labor out of the laborers as possible, and the laborers are trying to get as much pay as possible for their work, and they're not on an equal footing, obviously, because the capitalist can say you're fired from the worker if he can give, because he'll find somebody else maybe to work at the low wage. That's what they do when they ship jobs abroad or something. They find a lower wage place and they do them there. So capitalism is not. It can be just. That's if the man's willing willing to pay a family wage, but it creates strife, and then now we have the trade unions, which are opposition to management and all this conflict all the time. See, in the old days, in the Catholic days, they had guilds, and the guilds they became corrupt too. Of course, everything original sin is everywhere, and they became corrupt. But the guilds, where everybody in the industry were united in a guild, not just the owner and the people, but most people had their own shops anyway. There were small shops, there weren't big mass-produced factories. That was before the Industrial Revolution, really, that they had the guilds. But the guilds were concerned about the quality of the product, always trying to say, well, this is what we make. Okay, the Shoemakers Guild, we want to make better shoes. Or the Baker's Guild, we want to make sure we have high quality bread, and if a baker was making low quality bread, well then he would lose his right to be a baker if he was somehow skimping on the ingredients or whatever, and he'd be checked from time to time by the guild again. So they were more interested in the quality of the product rather than the quantity, rather than mass production. They were saying, no, we don't want mass production, we want quality products. You know, so there we get disposable products. You don't expect something to last. So, well, for the last 6 months, that's good. You know, even big things like a car, 5 years, and 5 or 10 years at the most, and then say, well, it's no good anymore. So now, junk, even though you spend a lot of money, we don't expect products to be durable, and you pass them down to your next generation or something, because we expect it to be disposable and cheap, because we don't want to pay for them, of course. You know, there probably still are good products out there, but the prices are very high, and nobody wants to pay for them. So mass production does enable the people that are not wealthy to have things anyway, even though they're not the best quality and stuff like that. That's what mass production did do. It made things more affordable for people. So everybody could afford. You know, today today a poor person has more than what the Queen had 500 years ago. He's got better stuff than what the Queen had, more stuff, and he's more comfortable and living better than Queen Elizabeth I was. But even though he's poor, because we have this mass production, so poor is a lot different today than what poor was in the time of our Lord. When poor was in the time of our Lord, we were poor. Now today, poor people, I remember they made a movie, The Grapes of Wrath, based on John Steinbeck's book about the Dust Bowl. I forget what the name of his book was. Maybe that was the name of his book as well, but I can't remember. But Steinbeck was a socialist and a evolutionist and all this. He wasn't a good man, but he wrote this book on about Grapes of Wrath, about the Dust Bowls when there was no rain in Oklahoma, Kansas, and there was no crops, and the sharecroppers, so they were working. They would crop the land for the owner, and they would get a share of the crop. So maybe 10% or 15% would belong to them, and that's what they lived on. But because there was no rain, there was no crop. So now they have no money. Of course, the landowner doesn't make any money that year either because there's nothing growing on the land. But so then a lot of them packed up and went to California. California was the land of milk and honey, so they were going up to California. And so they made this movie about the Big Grapes of Wrath book, the socialists did. It was promoting socialism. And they were showing it in the Soviet Union to show how poorly the poor were treated in America. But it backfired on them because they said, look, all those poor people in America got their own cars to jump in and drive out to California with. So the people in Russia didn't have, they weren't walking to California, they were driving to California, all their own cars to drive in. So it backfired, but that was the difference between capitalism and communism, that the wealth is more equally distributed. So capitalism is a better system than communism, but it's not a good system. Now, the two encyclicals on this, the Pope actually, this Rerum Novarum was written by Pope Leo XIII, and it was the first one on wages and just wages and labor and capital, because now the capital industry was taking over, and so this was how to regulate labor and capital, and that's a good thing to read. Rerum Novarum. It's very, very well. Even in the world, the secular, honest people say yes, it's very, very good. Quadragesimo Anno that means 40 years. It was written 40 years after Rerum Novarum by Pope Pius XI, I think. Pope Pius XI, I think it was him, Quadragesimo Anno, and updating it a little bit to more modern times for the 20th century when things were getting more advancing all the time. So the world was advancing in technology, and so this was Quadragesimo Anno. And then actually Pope John Paul wrote one called Centesimo Anno, 100 years later, 100 years after Rerum, on the 100th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, again trying to bring the social doctrine of the church up to modern times. But we got all the Marxism that came in to the church as well. And so Marxism is communism, really. It's a form of communism. And in South America, the priests were all promoting Marxism. They weren't calling it Marxism, of course. I think they called it liberation theology. But in fact, it was basically Marxism that we got to take from the rich and give to the poor. So people aren't allowed to be rich. Now, in a Catholic society, of course, the rich people would voluntarily take care of the poor, and there would be people devoting their lives to it, like the St. Vincent de Paul, the Vincentians, taking care of the poor, or the Sisters of Charity, and these people, they would have homes and food and they would actually do it properly. They would get to know the people and go visit them and see where they're living and give them a just. They would weed out the con people, the con man that comes in. They would, because the modern ones, they don't distinguish between a con man and an honest poor person. Just some guy. They would say, if some guy could work, they would try to find him a job. They would say, we're going to give you things. We ask somebody to hire him. And if he got fired and didn't work because he was too lazy or something, well then that would be different. But there would be charity in a Christian society, but we don't have a Christian society anymore. So we do need sometimes the welfare state, because we don't have a Christian society, and then we get the welfare state, and then we get a lot of corruption of the welfare state, but we get the welfare state, a bigger bureaucracy for the government to manage the welfare state, and things go down. But the society is not Christian. We can't expect to have justice in the society. It's only when you have a Christian society that you can expect to have justice. But that doesn't mean that we can be unjust ourselves, so we have to in fact be just. And if you're an employer, you have to be just to your employees and take care of them. But today we have the welfare state almost everywhere, and the government doing more and more, and then so it's even harder to do charity now. If you go do charity, you might get arrested. You say, why are you bringing those children into your house and feeding them, giving them a meal? Maybe you're trying to corrupt them or something like this. And have you been checked by the police to see if you're all right for this and that? So you can't even hardly do charity in a welfare state, in a socialist state. It's very hard to do something. You can put something in the St. Anthony's box in the petrol station, I guess, but who knows what St. Anthony does with that money. So, but if St. Anthony gets it. So, but anyway, this guy managing a petrol station one time, he said, St. Anthony's the best paid man in the shop here. So anyway, so let's hope St. Anthony gets it. But so all these the justice, just like if you don't have a Christian society and you don't want to obey God, and follow God's law, well then you have to have a police state. So we say we're getting a police state. The police are involved with everything. The police are telling us always what to do with this and that, but we don't want to have God telling us what to do. We said we don't want God, and the only other option is a police state. And so we get more and more tyranny, because we don't want the freedom that comes from serving God. If we don't want to serve God and be free and have a just society, well then we're going to serve the devil, and it's going to be a tyranny. And so that's why we get a police state everywhere. The police have all these powers, and we need more and more police and more and more police. This guy was living in a small town. He says, we need 6 policemen to watch us. This town was a town of about 2,000 people. He was telling me, we need 6 policemen. So these are the corruption. We'll look at this maybe Rerum Novarum Quadragesimo Anno next time. Now some moderns are promoting distributism. Some traditional Catholics are saying we need they said that would be a Catholic society, a Catholic system. It was first it's a new system, a new idea anyway, from I think the 19th century, so relatively new, and I think it wasn't a Catholic that thought it up. The idea is that the wealth is distributed somehow. Now, I don't know, I'm not an expert on it, so I can't really speak about that, but that's a system that some people are saying is a Catholic system. I think, I can't remember the man's name now that was behind it. Does anybody know the man's name?
Chesterton.
Chesterton was supporting that.
And there was another one.
There was somebody else that
Hilaire Block.
Yes, but there was somebody. There was another one that wasn't. He had just a 3-letter name. The surname was 3 letters. I can't remember, but Chesterton was promoting this, and Belloc. Those two were promoting distributors, and how it exactly works, I don't know. But they knew how it works. So, and they were both good Catholics, and they thought that it was it was a Catholic system. So there are people promoting it today, but they have no power to put it in place. So it doesn't really exist in reality. It's just a theoretical. This is just a theoretical system. It works on paper, but if you actually try it, will it work? We don't know, because it's never been tried. Because you can't find anybody that's got the power to try it. Because nobody with power is interested in that, because they can do better on capitalism or communism. So that's the way it works there. Anyway, are there any questions?
What about tithing?
Tithing. Tithing was required in the Old Testament. That comes under one of the commandments of the church. Tithing to the church, where you one of the commandments of the church is to provide for the pastors, I think, or something like this, so, to provide for the shepherds. But the church, I think, it never enforced tithing. The Jews had a tithe. You know, one thing they had before we get on tithing, one thing they had in Israel was the Jubilee year. And every 50 years was a Jubilee year, and every 50 years, everybody got their property back. If they'd sold it because they were poor or they were out of money, or they lent it out, or they rented it, or whatever happened, they got all their property back every 50 years. So that was the Jubilee year. That was put in by Moses, and that's what the Jubilee meant, because you would obviously rejoice if you were poor, you got your property back now, and then you can start over again. So it was a new start every 50 years. So, I mean, obviously, if a rich person's going to buy something and it's 2 years before the Jubilee, well, he's not going to pay as much as he would 45 years before the Jubilee, because it's not going to be worth as much. I would imagine. I don't know, but you know, we don't know the details of how they actually worked in practice. But they had the Jubilee, and that kind of kept things more equal. You know, that everybody, because everybody was supposed to be, all the families were given part of the land when they conquered the Holy Land. They were all given part of the land, and then each family got their own place. And then some cities were given to the Levites. They didn't get any land, but they got cities in different places. So it was all distributed in that way by whoever took Moses' place. So each family distributed amongst themselves, each tribe. They called them tribes, you know, because this tribe got this. They divided up the land between the tribes, and then the tribes had to divide it up amongst themselves with the families in the tribe. But I think everybody did get something. So everybody got something, and they were shepherds or something like. David was a young shepherd boy before he became before he killed Goliath. So yes. Now tithing, well, they had to tithe. So when the crop came in, or when they sold their sheep, 10% had to go to the temple. So that's what tithing is. Tithing is 10%. 10% went to the temple. Now, a lot of Protestants tithe today. The Protestant church likes this idea of tithing, and I've known people already, you know, that I've worked with, and we got paid maybe every fortnight, and they would write a check out. They moved a decimal from their pay, what they got over one notch, you know, and give exactly. So they might give you know, I don't know, $85.32 or something, because they got $853.20. So you know, they would give exactly. They just moved a decimal over and write their check for the next Sunday and give it to the Protestant preachers. So then the Protestant preachers did pretty good on that. You know, tithing, but we never had, as far as I know, they never had tithing in the Catholic Church. And we're supposed to all make some contribution according to our means of contributing. So everybody decides for themselves what they're going to contribute, but everybody is supposed to contribute. And that's why, you know, some families teach their children from young to put something in the basket every week. I know. Well, my mother did was. She'd look down the pew, you know, and everybody that was there, she'd pass an envelope down, and everybody had to put at least $1 in. And then she'd write all our names on the envelope. I don't know why she wrote all our names on the envelope, but she wrote all our names on the envelope, whoever was there, because sometimes there were different people there, because a lot of people used to stay at our house, because the door was never locked, and the boys knew they could always stay at our house, and they never get in trouble. Because if they were afraid to go home because it was too late or something, they always stayed at my brother's house, or Don's house, or Ed's house, or something, and they'd come up to bed. But they knew the rule was, if you stayed there Saturday night, you went to Mass Sunday morning. That was the only rule, really, so they had to prepare to go to Mass, and they had to put something in the basket, at least $1. They had to come up with at least $1 in the basket. So that was not tithing, but that's what we had to do. So yes, there's different systems, but tithing has never been in the Catholic Church, as far as I know. Okay. Any other questions?
Is usury still a sin, Is it a sin?
Well, this book says it's not. This book says, usury is the charging of excessive interest on money. The usurer takes unjust advantage of the need of another in order to make excessive profits. Under the appearance of helping the needy, a usurer often involves them in greater hardships, taking from them their means of livelihood. So,
It was the same before, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah.
Could you, it's wrong to lend money, but let's say somebody wanted to go to the credit union to, I don't know, buy a house or get their car fixed,
Yeah.
or something like that, that's okay as well?
What? To borrow money. Yeah, but they shouldn't be charging them interest.
Yeah. Can you tolerate that? Like it's not.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
you have no choice. If you need the money and they charge you interest, you gotta pay it. Just like the people
Yeah.
that have to pay excessive interest, because that's the only way they can get the money, all right? So nobody else will lend the money, so they say you're paying 30%. Well, they pay 30%, because that's the way they get, the guy gives them the money.
Yeah.
I remember, well, I won't, probably better not say the word since we recorded it, but when Father Scott was district superior, I was going to this one place in Philadelphia, and no, it wasn't, it was Binghamton, New York. And the man that was running things there had borrowed some money when they bought the church. They had a mortgage on it from the bank. And so Father Scott said to him, you're giving the certain type of people, he says, you're giving them all that interest. He says, give me interest. And so he said to Father Scott, he said, well, they gave me the money. He says, you give me the money, and I'll give you the interest. So that's what he said. So they gave me the money, so I gave him the interest. So if you need the money, and that's the only way you can get it, yeah, so it's lawful to, I think it's lawful to pay interest, yes. So today, in the society we live in, because there's no other way you can.
Because today, like, I don't know how most people, unless you come from a wealthy family or you got some wealthy relatives or something, are willing to lend you money. I don't know how somebody would buy a house or even sometimes a car.
Yeah,
Whatever.
that's right, yes. So it's hard, but sometimes everybody wants a brand new car.
Mm.
So maybe they can afford a 5-year-old car.
Yeah.
But they want to buy a brand new one, so they have to get a mortgage, yeah. Anyway, so that's, but houses is different. All right, any other questions? So usury is definitely an evil and a sin, but we have to live in the society we live in. We live in a society not run by God, so it's not going to be just society. So yes, we have to pay usury sometimes, and that's it. No more questions?
All right, we'll pray to say a prayer.